You think you stumbled onto this video by accident. Perhaps the thumbnail caught your eye for no clear reason. Perhaps the algorithm suggested it. Perhaps you were simply scrolling, searching for something, anything, to fill the quiet. But what if none of that was random? What if this moment, right now, wasn't chance at all, but an inevitability? Something arranged by a deeper intelligence, a part of you that already knows where this path is leading. Every step you've taken, every decision that seemed trivial, every coincidence that nudged you in one direction instead of another, has conspired to place you here, reading these words, hearing this voice. The ancients would not have called this an algorithm. The Greeks would have said you are guided by Moira, the thread of fate spun and cut by the three goddesses who ruled even over Zeus himself. In Eastern traditions, this is karma, not punishment, not reward, but the weaving of countless choices across lifetimes, binding you into encounters you cannot escape because they belong to your very soul. Renaissance mystics spoke of divine providence, the invisible hand of God arranging reality, so that no meeting, no discovery is ever an accident. And now here you are listening, not because the machine served you content, but because the universe served you a moment of recognition, because the part of you that already knows the truth has been reaching back through time, bending the strands of possibility, ensuring that this message would arrive in your awareness exactly when it needed to. Here's the secret few dare to say aloud. The instant you become aware of quantum reality becomes aware of you. Awareness is not passive, it is participation. The moment you perceive the possibility that consciousness shapes reality, you are not simply observing a theory. You are stepping inside it. You are touching the living fabric of existence, and it responds. That is why there is no going back. You cannot unknow this. You cannot slip comfortably into the belief that your life is random, that you're at the mercy of circumstance, that you're just a spectator. Once you glimpse the architecture beneath appearances, the scaffolding of synchronicities and patterns, you are changed. You are not just watching a video about transformation. You are the transformation happening in real time in the quantum field that both you and I are weaving together through this exchange. So let me take you somewhere most never go. Beyond the chatter of daily life, beyond the surface stories of cause and effect, into the territory where science collides with mystery, to the place where Einstein wrestled with probability, where Schrödinger dreamed of cats both alive and dead, where mystics and physicists alike whispered that time is not what it seems, to the threshold where you will begin to see that reality itself is not a sequence of accidents, but a deliberate unfolding, and that the one doing the unfolding has always been you, because what you're about to understand will not simply inform you, it will alter you. It will tilt the axis of your perception. It will awaken the memory that has been waiting all along, the memory of who you are in the vastness of time and who you are becoming. We are taught to believe that life unfolds in a straight line, past behind us, future ahead, the present a fleeting instant in between. It feels obvious, doesn't it? The sun rises, then it sets. A child grows, an elder fades. One event follows another in a tidy progression, cause followed by effect. This is what physicists once called classical reality, the assumption that time moves forward like an arrow, and that we are passengers strapped helplessly to its trajectory. But quantum reality whispers something different. It tells us that time is not a line, but a field, that past, present, and future do not exist as separate compartments, but as overlapping layers of possibility, that you are not merely dragged along by the current of time. You are shaping the river itself with every choice, every thought, every moment of awareness. This is not mystical fancy. It is rooted in the most disorienting discoveries of modern science. In the early 20th century, Werner Heisenberg revealed the uncertainty principle, showing that we cannot know both the position and momentum of a particle at once. Reality resists being pinned down. Albert Einstein struggled with this, protesting God does not play dice with the universe. And yet experiment after experiment showed that probability, not certainty, was the foundation of the physical world. And here's where it grows stranger. When physicists ran the double-slit experiment, they found that a particle of light behaves differently depending on whether it is being observed. The observer is not outside reality, passively watching events unfold. The observer is part of the unfolding. Consciousness is woven into the very fabric of what becomes real. If this unsettles you, you're not alone. Whole civilizations have wrestled with these questions long before science gave them equations. The Mayans built intricate calendars, not as clocks counting forward, but as maps of cycles repeating endlessly, spirals of time where the future always echoes the past. In Hindu cosmology, yugas describe vast epochs where creation and destruction dance in eternal rhythm, time circling back upon itself like a serpent swallowing its tail. Even the Stoics believed in the eternal return, the idea that all events will recur again and again in an infinite loop. Now consider this. If time is not linear, then your future self is not waiting for you at the end of a line. They exist now, alongside you, sending signals backward through the field of time itself. Every coincidence you've noticed, every impossible alignment, every synchronicity has been one of those signals, breadcrumbs left on the path by a version of you that already knows what you are becoming. Think back to the last week of your life. How many moments felt uncanny, perfectly timed? A conversation that answered a question you hadn't yet spoken, a chance encounter that shifted your mood, a piece of information appearing just as you needed it. Classical thinking calls these accidents, but quantum reality reveals them as echoes, vibrations from futures already crystallized, rippling backward to guide your present into alignment. And yet here is where most people remain stuck. They continue to imagine the future as something that happens to them, a place they'll eventually stumble into, hoping conditions will align just right. They wait for luck, for fate, for external circumstances, but that is the greatest illusion of all. The truth is this: your future is not separate from you. It is entangled with you. It is reaching back, weaving circumstances, aligning meetings, arranging the symphony of chance so that you will arrive exactly where you are meant to. And once you begin to see this, once you allow yourself to feel the threads pulling you not forward but inward, you will never experience time in quite the same way again. Every thought you think, every emotion that stirs in your chest, every decision you make sends out a ripple, a subtle vibration across the invisible fabric of existence. Physicists call these impressions quantum signatures, unique energetic patterns that do not vanish when you stop thinking or feeling them, but instead echo through the quantum field, across space and across time. These signatures behave like waves in water, colliding, interfering, creating resonance patterns that reach far beyond the present moment. Imagine striking a single note on a violin. That sound doesn't remain confined to the strings. It resonates through the air, vibrates the wood of the instrument, and even causes other strings to hum in sympathy. In much the same way, your inner states resonate across the timeline of your life. When your future self achieves a breakthrough, when they step into a higher frequency of awareness, when they resolve the struggle you are still wrestling with. That shift doesn't remain locked in their future. Its resonance ripples backward into your present. You experience it as an intuitive hunch that defies logic, as a sudden insight that feels like remembering rather than learning, as a conversation that arrives with uncanny precision. These are not accidents. They are interference patterns between the quantum signature of who you are now and who you are becoming. This idea may feel startlingly new, but echoes of it can be found in the wisdom of ages. Pythagoras, the ancient Greek philosopher, believed that the universe was constructed on the principle of harmony, that all is number, and that vibrations govern both music and the cosmos. Sufi mystics spoke of the sama, the sacred listening, through which divine vibrations stirred the soul. Buddhist monks chant not merely as ritual, but because sound itself carries frequencies that attune the body and mind to higher states. The ancients knew, in poetic language, what modern physics begins to describe with mathematics. Vibration is the hidden architecture of reality, and so it is with your consciousness. On the mental layer, quantum signatures appear as those stray thoughts that seem to come from nowhere, those aha moments when suddenly you know something you never studied. On the emotional layer, they arrive as sudden waves of certainty, gut-level knowing, or even inexplicable attraction toward a choice that logic cannot justify. On the physical layer, they are embodied resonance, walking into a room and feeling an inexplicable heaviness, or meeting someone and instantly sensing that your paths are aligned or opposed. But perhaps the most mysterious is the energetic layer. Here, quantum signatures create what might be called reality anchors, stable points in the quantum field that draw experiences toward you, much like magnets draw iron filings into patterns. When your future self reaches a certain state of consciousness, that achievement becomes an anchor. From your perspective now, it may feel as though opportunities suddenly fall into place, as though the world is conspiring to help you. In truth, the anchor was already there, pulling you toward it across time. This explains why some people seem to move through life effortlessly, while others struggle year after year with the same goals. It is not luck, it is not privilege alone, it is resonance. It is alignment with the quantum signatures of their future selves. What you are learning is that you're not isolated within your present moment. You're a symphony in progress, a melody already written across multiple measures of time. And each note you play now is already harmonizing with the notes your future self has struck. The more you listen, the more you recognize that what feels like coincidence is really the music of your own becoming, echoing backward to guide you forward. Most people move through life, overwhelmed by the sheer flood of thoughts, feelings, and impressions that stream through their awareness every day. 1,000 inner voices chatter and collide. Memories, worries, instincts, flashes of imagination, and it all blends together into what feels like a single, chaotic noise. But quantum consciousness teaches us that not all information is created equal. In fact, what flows through you comes from distinct layers of time itself. And learning to recognize these layers is what we might call quantum literacy. The first stream comes from the past, your conditioning, your habits, the neural grooves carved deep by repetition. These are the old loops of thought that echo familiar phrases. I've always been this way. Nothing ever works out. I can't change who I am. They feel heavy, repetitive, and closed. Ancient philosophies warned of this. The Stoics spoke of phantasiae, impressions from past experiences that cling to the mind and distort perception. In Buddhism, these are karmic seeds ripening, pulling you back into cycles of thought and behavior you may have long outgrown. This information is not wrong, but it is old. It is gravity pulling you backward. The second stream is present awareness. This is raw perception unfiltered by memory or projection. The sensation of breath, the exact color of the sky, the truth of what is happening right now. When you are here, with no story layered on top, the information feels alive, sharp, and liberating. Zen masters called this direct seeing. It is the rare and luminous clarity that allows you to step out of the wheel of repetition and meet life freshly. And then there is the third stream, the whispers of your future self. These impressions do not sound like the past, nor do they resemble simple observation of the present. Instead, they feel expansive, like invitations from a horizon you cannot yet see. They arrive as impossible ideas that still feel undeniable, as sudden surges of inspiration, as inner nudges that call you toward paths your rational mind dismisses. Many cultures described this differently. The Greeks spoke of the daemon, a guiding spirit that led a person toward their destiny. Indigenous shamans described receiving visions from ancestors who were also descendants, voices that spoke across generations. Today we might say, these are transmissions from a version of you who already stands in the place you long to reach. To live without quantum literacy is to wander lost in the storm, unable to tell whether the voice in your head is a ghost of the past, a glimpse of the future, or the clarity of the present moment. But to cultivate this literacy is to gain a compass. You begin to hear the weight of old conditioning and set it aside. You begin to trust the brilliance of direct awareness. And most importantly, you begin to recognize the signature of your future self calling you forward. This is no small skill. Entire spiritual traditions were built around training people to discern these voices. Prophets withdrew into deserts to distinguish divine vision from their own fears. Monks sat in silence for decades, learning to separate mind chatter from genuine insight. In our time, science lends language to what they intuited, streams of information arising from different layers of time, each carrying its own vibrational fingerprint. And here lies the turning point. When you can tell the difference between past loops, present clarity, and future guidance, you gain the power to choose which current to follow. You no longer mistake every thought as truth. You no longer chase every emotion as destiny. Instead, you navigate with precision, aligning yourself with the resonance that pulls you toward who you are becoming. This is quantum literacy, and once you develop it, your life ceases to feel like a storm. It begins to feel like a symphony, with you as both the listener and the composer. Most of us are taught to think of the future as something we must create. We imagine that what we desire doesn't yet exist, that we must fight against obstacles, push against the present, and wrestle life into submission until it finally yields to our will. But in quantum consciousness, the future is not something you invent. It is something you remember. A version of you has already lived it, already reached it, already become it. What you call manifestation is less about construction and more about recognition. When you try to create, you operate from lack, believing that what you want is absent. But when you remember, you step into resonance with a future that is already anchored in the quantum field. Suddenly, life feels less like swimming upstream and more like following a current that was always waiting for you. This is what mystics have called grace. It is not about no effort. It is about effort that flows. History is filled with figures who seem to live this way, guided by a knowing that appeared to reach across time. Joan of Arc, a teenage peasant, claimed she heard voices and saw visions guiding her to lead armies that would alter the course of France. Was she delusional, or was she tapping into a future self who had already carved her destiny into the field of possibility. Nikola Tesla described receiving complete inventions in visions so vivid he could turn them in his mind and test them before ever touching a tool. Leonardo da Vinci filled his notebooks with machines that would not exist for centuries, as if he were remembering futures not yet born. These are extreme examples, but they reflect a principle that exists in every human life: the future self whispering into the present. Think of the people you've known who seem lucky, who are always in the right place at the right time, whose decisions consistently lead to doors opening. We marvel at them as if fortune favors them blindly, but luck, in the quantum sense, is often alignment, the ability to listen to guidance from the self that already knows. They are not forcing the world to bend to them. They are bending to the world's deeper pattern, letting it carry them forward. This is the difference between forcing and flowing. Forcing is the mindset of the classical self. I must fight for every inch. I must control every variable. I must make it happen. Flowing is the mindset of the quantum self. I am attuned to the breadcrumbs. I am responsive to synchronicity. I trust the signals that arrive at exactly the right time. And here's the paradox. When you stop straining to create and begin remembering instead, the outcomes you once thought impossible begin to appear naturally. The path clears, the pieces fit, the right people cross your path. The impossible feels inevitable. So ask yourself, what old patterns of forcing, of struggling, are you ready to release? What would it feel like to trust that your future has already happened, and your role is simply to remember it into being? Because once you step into this remembering, you begin to see life not as an endless battle against resistance, but as a dance with time itself. If your future self is whispering into your present, then your present choices are not meaningless. They are replies. Every decision you make, every time you choose to trust that subtle nudge or ignore it, you are shaping the strength of the connection. This is not a one-way broadcast. It is a dialogue. Imagine it as a feedback loop. Your future self sends guidance backward, an intuition, a synchronicity, a door opening at just the right moment. When you act on that guidance, you empower your future self to reach even higher, to step into an even greater state of consciousness. And from that place, they can send back even more refined guidance, which allows you to make even more aligned choices. Round and round it goes, a spiral of growth folding backward and forward through time. Ancient traditions hinted at this. The Greek god Hermes was said to be a messenger who moved freely between realms, carrying words of the divine to mortals and returning their prayers to the gods. Shamans across cultures have spoken of traveling through the corridors of time, gathering visions not just from ancestors, but from descendants yet to be born. These myths and practices can be read as metaphors for something quantum mechanics now suggests. Consciousness does not obey the tidy boundaries of past and future, and yet most of us are afraid of this dance because it requires us to embrace uncertainty. Conditioned by a world that praises control and prediction, we cling to the known, terrified of stepping into the space between what is and what could be. But quantum consciousness reveals that this fertile void is not emptiness, it is potential. Uncertainty is not your enemy. It is the womb of every possibility. Think of explorers standing on the edge of maps not yet drawn. To them, the unknown was not a blank space of terror, but a field of discovery. To surf the quantum wave is to live like that, to treat uncertainty not as danger, but as invitation. As you begin to practice this, something remarkable happens. You start to sense that you are not a single linear being marching through time, but a multidimensional consciousness stretched across multiple coordinates at once. One self making choices now, another self sending guidance from what you call the future, and both connected to an even vaster intelligence that holds the whole pattern. When you glimpse this, life begins to shimmer. Synchronicities stop feeling rare and start feeling like the native language of reality. Decisions feel less like gambles and more like collaborations with a wiser version of yourself. Even the unknown stops being a void you fear and becomes an ocean you learn to sail. This is the quantum dialogue, not prophecy, not superstition, but a living conversation across the weave of time between the you who is becoming and the you who already is. Up until now, you may have thought of this awakening as something personal, a private discovery between you and your future self. But consciousness does not evolve in isolation. Every shift you make, every time you choose quantum awareness over classical limitation, you add your frequency to a larger field. You become part of a collective resonance that is reshaping the destiny of humanity itself. History shows us that great transformations rarely arrive through individual effort alone. They come as waves of awakening. The Renaissance did not ignite because of one thinker, but because countless artists, philosophers, and dreamers began tuning into a new frequency of possibility. The Enlightenment spread like wildfire because more and more people dared to imagine a world ruled by reason and liberty rather than fear and tradition. Even movements for justice, the abolition of slavery, civil rights, women's suffrage, were not sudden miracles, but the result of ordinary people awakening one by one until the balance tipped. Each individual became a node in a network of awakening, amplifying the signal for others. The same is happening now. We are living in an age where consciousness itself is evolving, and you are not just a witness. You are a participant. When you align with your future self, when you live as if time is not a chain but a field, you broadcast that reality to everyone around you. Your very presence shifts the possibilities available to others. You become what we might call a reality catalyst, someone whose alignment accelerates alignment in others. And with this awareness comes responsibility, because once you know that your thoughts and feelings ripple outward, shaping not only your personal timeline, but the collective one, you can no longer pretend to be powerless. You can no longer hide behind the excuse of randomness or victimhood. Every moment you choose fear, you feed fear into the collective field. Every moment you choose trust, you strengthen the fabric of possibility for everyone. This is why awakening is not just about your happiness, your success, your growth. It is about the great turning of the human story. Imagine if each person alive right now remembered, even for a moment, that they are not separate from the reality they experience, that they are co-creators with time itself. Wars, divisions, and cycles of despair would not simply vanish overnight, but their gravitational pull would weaken. A different future would crystallize, one woven not from struggle, but from resonance. You're being asked to step into this larger role, not as a saint or savior, but as a participant in the symphony. Your future self has guided you here because your note matters. Without it, the harmony is incomplete. So take this awareness seriously. Let it live not just in your thoughts, but in your actions, your relationships, your choices. Recognize that every synchronistic breadcrumb you follow is not only aligning you with your highest future, but contributing to the unfolding of humanity's highest future as well. Because this is not just your story. This is our story. And the future that is calling you, the magnificent one shimmering just beyond the veil, is also calling us all.